Good evening, everybody, and welcome to a totally impromptu and not planned video at all. I hope everybody is doing well. I hope everyone got through their weekend in one piece. I most certainly did. I made sure I took it a little bit easy this weekend and gave myself enough time and space around anything that I felt I had to do. That's one thing that I do sometimes, I have to be honest, struggle with is the pacing yourself bit and all that. But that's a topic for another day. Do whole podcasts on that. And I do plan on doing so as well in the near future. But that's, again, another story. But yeah, I'm doing all right. I got through it all right. And the Monday is upon us and nearly over in a flash. I just wanted to really bring you this video just to follow up on the last video I put out, which was looking at an old building in particular in Boscombe. But you could do this in every town or village around the world because you experience and see the same phenomena around the world. And that is that on closer inspection, when you go up to the grids on ground level that you see up against the wall of these buildings and you take a closer look, you can often see windows underneath, so they're subterranean, or you can see where windows once were, outlined, bricked in or whatever, but they are below ground level is the point. Now, if you build, this was my point of the video, if you build basement walls to support, or they're your foundation of the building that you're building, that you're constructing, that has to be the part of the building that is impervious, because it's the one that's surrounded by earth. It's the one that's going to be in the ground. That part of the building will be underground. You ain't going to be building that with windows in them. That was my point. Yes, I'm sure there are people who build their own houses who, for novelty reasons or the use of prism lighting and all that sort of stuff, decorative reasons and whatnot, will have basement areas where they let in natural light and use all this prism lighting by way of glass bricks or glass blocks as they're called. Prism lighting, by the way, that's been around since the 1850s, roughly, according to the history books. Interesting, isn't it? That it's always mid 1800s, always. With anything of any significance, that is where knowledge comes to the forefront, or we're told anyway, things get invented. I prefer to use the word introduced. I think that things just get introduced to the public, because otherwise, how on earth would you be building anything back in the day if you didn't have transportation systems? The logistical aspect of it would just be impossible. So you would have needed something to A, get you around, and B, to be able to carry whatever it is that's getting you around. There are other ways of shifting large quantities of things, of course, and that is by way of sound frequencies and stuff like that. I was kindly reminded of over the weekend by somebody who works in a shop just down the road. But these are all things that they're just questions that I like to ask, because since I've been keeping my eye on the sort of old world aspect of our surroundings, the hidden history. Some people like to call it Tartaria, other people like to call it mud flood, because that is really the key element to it. Why are these parts of the buildings underground? Like I say, yes, they will build buildings, if I can even say it correctly, that sometimes allow natural light in. You can have buildings built like that. But the norm is, most definitely, your foundational part of the building has to be the most solid, and it has to be the bit that will erode least or least quickest, or whatever, whichever terminology you want to use. And putting windows in them will most definitely weaken them. And to highlight that fact, I remember when we went on the UK tour last year, one of the places we went to was Bath, and Bath is full of apartments that have basement apartments, right? And the roads are literally kept away from the sides of the buildings by metal beams, iron beams, like rows of it, thousands of yards of iron beams, left and right. They don't even hide it there. quite clearly to keep the retaining walls away from the buildings, that's been pulled back at some point to allow for the basements to be accessed, because there's windows underground and there shouldn't be, right? Anyway, I was going to do a video outdoors today. In fact, I was going to go live actually. I went to a place called Westbourne, which is a borough just on the fringes of Bournemouth. But to be honest with you, so many things went wrong that I kind of told myself that no, it probably is best to sometimes just not do something if clearly every attempt that you make is not quite working out for whatever reason. You can force yourself to do something, and sometimes it's good to not go the whole, attempt, but then maybe just back off. So I did. It was very strange. People just appearing out of nowhere right next to me, cars pulling up right in front of me, all sorts of weird and wonderful things happening today. People looking at me, one person, an elderly fella. I was stood leant against the wall with my camera, with my phone, just trying to actually, about to go live, funny enough. And this car pulls up right in front of me. He walks out the house behind me and gives me this look up and down, kind of look as if to say, what are you doing stood here, kind of thing. And I asked him if everything was all right, because he looked a little bit stressed. And he told me, these were his words, this was his response. I don't know this guy from Adam, by the way. His response to me was, I have PTSD. Would you like me to punch your nose in for you? What are you going to do? What can you say? What can you do when you're confronted by something like that during the course of a day, out of the blue, from absolutely nowhere? The last thing I do when I go out, especially when I'm filming or, trying to do some video footage or whatever, is antagonize the locals or anything like that. But today was particularly, I felt, how can I put it, hostile almost, because everywhere I went, I seemed to be in the way of somebody. I seemed to not be, it was almost like it felt very tribal. It was very weird. I don't know. And, I'm not besotted by paranoia or anything like that. I don't walk around looking over my shoulder every 2 minutes. What is, and that's it. I mean, what else? What are you going to do? You've got to crack on with your life, whether you feel that things are going your way or not, whatever it may be. But sometimes it stands out and becomes very noticeable. And today was one of those days, crowned off by the comments of the gentleman there, which I just found absolutely baffling. So, and it falls in line with what I was going to say actually about the video that I recently put out, talking about the windows underground and stuff like that. I also posted it on Facebook, and I also posted it on Instagram. Now, I'm all for having a conversation around topics, and I'm all for having that dialogue and, brainstorming it and thinking it, out loud amongst us and all that sort of stuff. What I'm not into and up for is people taking pot shots, because at the end of the day, it clearly got nothing to do with the topic, has it? It's just the argumentative nature of online behavior of some people, it seems to me. But if you want to check it out, if you've got 2 minutes to spare, have a look at my Facebook page, and then you see what I mean when you read the comments at the bottom of one or two people. A couple of people who I haven't seen for years or heard anything of for years decide to pop up and just throw in a one-worder or whatever, something very negative and very sort of just bizarre. And other people doing my thinking for me, telling other people in there what I was thinking whilst doing the video, and this, that, and the other, and doing a psychoanalysis of me as well, which is also very generous. But these are things where you're thinking to yourself, all I'm doing is talking about my immediate environment. If you look at my channel, I cross over a few topics because they are all connected. They are all to do with the whole point that I'm trying to make, which is that we're born into a system, an environment that has been laid out for us the way it is, right? It's not happened by any coincidence. There's no happenstance in all of this, and the significance of looking at the old world buildings is it gives you a date as to when it's actually plausible that you would have a functioning society up and running in the form of human beings like ourselves. And all the evidence points to the early 1800s. No further back than that. Why? Because pre-industrialization, which were the early 1800s, so we're told, there was nothing going down in terms of steam technology or anything of the sort that could have ever assisted you in your quest to find stones that you'd need in the ground. Never mind dig them up and break them up and transport them and all the rest of it, blah-de-blah, right? So there are a plethora of other arguments. But the point I'm making is these topics are all connected. Just keep looking at the clock, so I'm aware that I've only got about 15 minutes left, but I won't use the whole lot. So, the topics are all interconnected, is the point I'm making on that. And if I can make that relatively clear by using very simple examples, and the best examples are the ones that we're confronted with on a daily basis that we see in amongst us every day. We don't need imagination for it, like how pseudoscience works. Throw in a story via the BBC that some Russian rocket has crashed on the surface of the moon, and that way you just keep validating the norm, the narrative, which is, yes, of course, space is real. That doesn't even come up for question. Well beyond that point kind of thing. Well, I like to row it back and bring it back to reality, which is, what do we actually observe? Forget about what we've been told. What do you observe? If you're observing, let's bring it back to the buildings example, windows beneath ground level, then you have to ask yourself why. The ground has clearly come up. Yes. Has it been brought up? Probably by roadworks and such like. Yeah, in parts, would have to have been, to level the roads up so that you can gain access to what would become your ground levels in these houses. That's why you see concrete stairs going from the street up into ground level, or maybe down slightly into ground level, because they've leveled the roads up a little bit. They've had to. But the whole landscape has come up, though, prior to them leveling it up. How do we know that? Because the buildings are submerged. And that's the point. So if we consider that we've been lied to about that, and that the buildings that we're told weren't built in the 1800s, but they were merely founded, as the word would suggest, refurbished, repurposed, and all the rest of it, then suddenly our history takes on a totally different look and makes much more sense. And also, it makes more sense of all the other lies as well, because actually, yeah, they literally are lying about pretty much everything. And we have to also remember this stuff is taught in schools as the norm. The Victorians built this, the Romans built that, the Greeks built this, Da Vinci painted that. Really? Says who? And that's my point. It's okay to ask that question. Says who? Oh, well, such and such an institute. Oh, okay. And who are they connected with? And who are they sponsored by and financed by? And since when do they exist? And et cetera, et cetera. And you'll find that all roads then lead to roughly the same date. I like to throw this one in, but it's a very important fact. The general population were, to the great extent, illiterate until the mid-18 to late 1800s. So how were you ever getting together a pool of expertise from a population that couldn't read and write, to then eventually become your architects, your draftsmen and women, whatever, your surveyors, all these people that you would need in the whole planning process, and of course in the actual execution process, of these amazing constructions that you find right around the world. If you haven't got a population that can read and write, then you're not ever going to get an expertise out of that population, are you? How are you going to do that? They have to have some sort of foundational education in place for that to work in the first instance. So these are questions upon questions. And that's why I find those videos quite significant, because they are examples that we have right in front of our eyes. Just getting back to the Bath thing I meant to mention that I didn't round off earlier. When I spoke to one of the locals who occupied one of those basement flats that I told you about on the sides of many streets in Bath, he said to me that he always had problems in the autumn and the winter with his windows and his frames. Yeah, of course, because your windows were never meant to be underground. Anyway, I'll leave that topic for the moment, but I just wanted to sort of respond a little bit to the responses that I in turn receive from my video. I'm not trying to rewrite the history books or anything. I'm just questioning them because it doesn't make sense. And I think it's okay to question them. Since when wasn't it okay to question stuff? You know, it's not me being awkward. It's not me being pedantic. But it's my way of reminding everybody that you're entitled to do just that. Question everything until you're satisfied that the answer that you have is the right one. And if it isn't, you keep looking. And if you can't find one, then come to terms with the fact that there isn't one maybe. And then it's okay not to know. Because that's also an option, by the way, as well. I know that's very difficult in today's society because everybody thinks they know, but of course they do not. But anyway, moving on, before I forget, and that is off the top of my head, there is, as far as I know, but I do believe, a Flat Earth Social on the 29th of August. That will be Tuesday, the 29th of August at 1900 hours in the Pavilion Arms in Bournemouth. I do believe that Mark Devlin will be gracing us with his presence. He'll be no doubt talking mainly about the music industry and all sorts of goings on. So that is definitely something worth listening in on. If you get a chance to come along, do. I've heard him talk a couple of times. I know quite a bit of stuff that he's done, and also Mike Williams, who he's worked with in the past as well, who goes by the name of Sage Quay online. Very good content creator. Look him up. He goes a bit more in depth about Tavistock and how the social engineering projects were sort of started off. Who's behind it? One of the main projects being, for example, the so-called British invasion of the early '60s. You know, that was they piggybacked basically Beatlemania and all the rest of it, and how that was a project that was rolled out that we still feel the effects of to this very, very day. Anyway, but that will be Mark Devlin. That won't be Mark Devlin, but Mark Devlin, who knows Mike Williams, but Mark Devlin, he will be talking on the 29th, I do believe. So do come along for that. I shall be there, most definitely. And apart from that, I think there's nothing more to bring you, not off the top of my head. As you can see behind me, we have Larry, the Pondering Ape, and the Masses. And that's all they do all day now, is ponder that ball. Nothing much to ponder, really. So, on that profound note, I bid you all farewell, and I will see you all soon. Some of you much, much sooner. But until then, take it easy, and ta-ta for now.